Ontario, when they studied, they had to put in their curriculum Aboriginal culture. Oh, we'll study Inuit, Indians, and Métis all as one, right? Oh, by the way, Métis have a stash. Okay, like, give me a break, right? They don't teach our history because they stole the lands of the Aboriginal people, okay? And so there's been multi-generational attempts to erode what an Aboriginal person is in Canada. They still don't want to recognize, even though in the Manitoba Act, Johnny MacDonald was supposed to deal with the Eastern Métis. They still do not want to deal with the Eastern Métis. The Métis Nation of Ontario is a political lobbyist group that swears allegiance to the Métis National Council. Now they're in big fights and everything, but when they had the Powley case about the moose, the new guy at the head of the Métis Nation at that time, Balcour, he said right in the court, well, we find some Aboriginal people, put them together, make a community, and that's the new Métis Nation of Ontario. Well, when you sign the application, I think they changed it. When you sign the original, you give up your Aboriginal rights to the corporation, and you can't be a member of any other organization or not-for-profit organization or Aboriginal community, which is against the not-for-profit rules. You can't discriminate from people from joining. So when you got a not-for-profit, anyone can join them, right? Like I could join this the Center for the Blind, or the Center for this, or the Center for that, right? Even though I'm not blind. That's the rules. But they violated that. They set up the Métis Nation, and then they got all the funding in Ontario, and their homeland that they swear allegiance to is west of the Dryden border. So how does that work? So that's to put one group against the other, so they're always fighting, right? And that's the way they manage that. But if I said I was, say, for example, I don't want to say this word, but one group, I can go to another country and get an immediate citizenship. I can say this one, if I say have one drop of Maori blood, I can get citizenship in New Zealand if they accept me, right? But in Canada, if I say I'm Métis, well, we don't recognize you. You're not Métis. So you see, we're the only race, because as Champlain said, we're a race. We're the only race in Canada that can't self-identify unless we become a member of a Métis not-for-profit corporation that swears allegiance to the surrendered Métis under the Manitoba Act, right? So yeah, we have a long way to go.
So I played the clip of you earlier saying that the racial purity thing is sort of it's not really true. It's not a reality. But here we are talking about what essentially, I think, what percentage of blood this way or that way is in someone's body to determine if they're legitimately Métis. How do we define that, or how do we deal with that issue?
What's the difference between a Métis and a First Nations individual? I'll give you an example. In the 1800s, there were no women in the Haudenosaunee groups at Montreal, the Mohawks. There's no women left in the tribe. So what did they do? They went down to Massachusetts and down there and they raided the towns and stole all the women and children from the Swiss and the Dutch community. This is historic. You can research it, right? They brought them all back up to Quebec there in Montreal because they needed women to procreate. Well, when the men it took them about 10 years or something for the men down there to get enough gumption to come get their women. The women didn't want to go back. So when you go to some of these communities on Cornwall, the Akwesasne or the Ganasatagi, Ganawaki, you'll see a lot of blue-eyed, blonde people, right? And a lot of them are intermarried, cousins marrying cousins, just like my family, right? Because there was no people to marry in those days, right? So what's the difference genetically from them and say myself, right? There is no racial distinction other than the A, B, C, D, and X on the mitochondrial DNA. But when you look at the DNA on Anishinaabe people in Eastern Canada, the X on the mitochondrial DNA is going all the way across to the Hopi. They have X and they come from Europe. They don't come across the Bering Strait. There's no X in Siberia, anywhere in there. How did they get the X? They came with the Solutrean. That's one of the reasons in discussion, like I said earlier, that I said were Salutrid, right? They have Aboriginal people down in Florida, the swamp bodies in the peat bog. The DNA for them comes from Scotland. So how, or England, like how did they get to Florida like 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago? Then you got if you go and look at the genetic stuff all the time down in South America, they're now saying that most of the Aborigine Amazons got their DNA from Polynesia and Australia, right? But they're now Aboriginals directly from there. And then they look at the Paracas skulls, and they're finding the Paracas skulls were redhead. They've got Scottish DNA. You got to really research to find this stuff. And in my case, my B bloodline, they've just proven a report from down by the Himalayas. 60,000-year-old Neanderthal is B blood type. That's mine, right? Now they're saying North American Aboriginals have more Denisovan and Neanderthal genetics than anywhere else on the world, other than some of the Java people in Papua New Guinea and Australians. The Denisovan is heavy down in that, but we're all related, right? So what is racial purity? There's no such thing. Race was defined for a reason under the papal bulls of the 1500s. So if you don't become a new Christian, like they had old Christian, new Christian, if you don't become a new Christian on the papal bulls in the 1500s, you can have slavery. And that's why they had slavery in South America. People don't know their history. There is no such thing as race. Race is just a word for rights for slavery. You know?
So if there is no such thing as race, then how does race play into what you were just talking about? You said that it's both, it's race and culture, but if race isn't a thing, which I think is actually the opposite of racial supremacy ideology,
yeah.
or even a fascistic ethno ideology, it's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
It's very tolerant and inclusive. So how does race play into the definition of what Métis ultimately should be?
It's culture.
Culture.
It's culture. You can have a racial component because there's some people that can prove that they have basically 100% Aboriginal genetics from before a contact, right?
But so ultimately, anybody could then say that racially, I could be, that we're all interrelated, so it's not an issue. But then in terms of culture,
$13 of ease. We all got the same genetics, right? Some of us got more Neanderthal. Some of us have more Denisovan. Some have the hidden ancestral one too. But it's culture. Like, what is an Englishman? Right? Oh, I'm English. Yep. What's an Irishman? Well, now they prove the Irish are actually Egyptians. They all, 90% of Britain have the same DNA as Tutankhamun. So what are they? Well, Tutankhamun wasn't Egyptian. He was.
So obviously you can see why the federal government gets confused, maybe even scared when it comes to extending rights to different Métis groups, because it becomes difficult to determine whether someone is Métis or not. But I mean, we're talking now kind of pushing race aside, and it's being defined in terms of culture or adoption even. Yeah. You know, and from a legal perspective, I can understand the adoption process. If I, as a parent, wanted to adopt a child, maybe someone with Asian background, it would then become part of my family legally, and we wouldn't look anything the same, right?
That's the Indian Act.
So
the Indian Act says that you can adopt a non-Aboriginal person, they get a status card, right?
Right.
Now they've changed the Indian Act over the last few years since I was with Indian Affairs, that a full adult can adopt a full white or whatever race adult, and they get a status card. Mm-hmm. So these rules that they've created, which they change all the time to their benefit, right, have no justification. But you can join a new culture and become part of that culture and extend that culture to the future for the 7 generations. The way the government is trying to take over Aboriginal lands over a long time, like the Chinese go 300 years or something, and their philosophy of expansion, right? It's not just the 3 years and then we forget what we're doing, or the 5 years for your economic development for your business, right? What they're doing, the government, is over time, it'll be a melting pot like the United States, right? Most tribes in the United States are surrendered under military occupation. You've got federally recognized tribes, you've got state recognized tribes, and you've got other tribes that aren't recognized at all, right? And what's the difference? They're all the same people, right? See this sectionization and segregation. When the Brits came here in 1773, they got all these old maps from the French about who were the Aboriginal communities in Ontario. If you look at those Aboriginal communities, there's only about 3, I think, that they still have the same name. Like the Kilisatron Nipisaprin, which I am, and the Huron are still there. But depending on what the chief's name were, there's lists of all these different tribes, right? And they got rid of them. You know, they set up fake tribes by taking what they used to call the fake Indians in Montreal, which are a whole bunch of Frenchmen and Portuguese and Italian and Spanish that were living with the Aboriginal people, and they shoved them to other communities. Kitikinzibi was not an original community. Wattamohawk was an original community. They only set up in 1880, right? The Algonquins and Powhatan, they're all pieces of different groups that they put in. They're the only ones. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but that's the way it is, right? When the French gave guns and medicines to the Hurons and the ones that didn't want to go become Catholic, right? They brought the Seneca come up from the States to attack them, and they moved them to Laurier, Quebec, right? So people don't know the history of the Aboriginal communities and the effect of colonization on them. So you have a lot of people who are actually Métis that have no knowledge of the fact that they're Métis or their ancestral heritage. I know people that don't know their grandparents' name, right? And they've been here, their family's been here since probably the beginning of New France, and they don't know their ancestors. That's where you talk about culture. What's your culture? What's your family's belief in who you are, where you come from, and how do you integrate that into your daily life? Well, if you don't know anything about Aboriginal culture, and you only know, you know, those games on the computer and everything, right? How do you have a culture? How are you part of a community? How are you part of that Aboriginal philosophy, beliefs? No, you've been assimilated. And Trudeau said that, and René Lévesque said that. And my joke was, if René Lévesque, who's actually a relative of mine, and he actually has Aboriginal ancestry, if he had said that he was a Métis in Quebec instead of the Québécois, he would have won the referendum. But he was told by Trudeau, just keep it little, just say you're a Québécois, right? Paul Martin, he has 2 Aboriginal ancestry. I had his genealogy in my database, right? So he is the prime minister, but they're all, you know, they're all following the precepts of the government structure under the crown because they get benefits financially, these people who are in politics, right?
And this all ties into, you know, what's going on today. And you talked about immigration. It seems to me that, well, again, all of this stuff ties together. The dots connect, and the immigration itself, the way this is all being done, I think puts culture for some communities at risk. Is that fair?
Definitely. And maybe to sum up where I stand right now, my grandfather sat me on the knee. He was a Métis boat builder, and my other sign was a voyageur, right? And the Vigée line, voyageurs. I got Mi'kmaq, all these different groups, right? And some adopted in, but became part of the family and everything, right? All part of the culture. My grandfather practiced his culture. He told me the traditions. He was a boat builder. He was a cook. He was a boatman on the rich people's boats at Aurelia. I forget the name of the lake, Couchiching. He told me the stories and I took proud. I grew up learning all the crafts, the native crafts. I don't know if you see me, I still practice them. I practice my traditions in all my affairs, right? I still do it. That's culture. You have to have this culture. You got people in Toronto, say Italians, they're so proud of their heritage, right? If I say I'm Métis, no one wants to listen, and no one, oh, what, you pretend Indian. I'm not a pretend Indian. I'm not, well, sorry, I'll correct myself. Under the Daniels case, Métis are now Indians, but not under the Indian Act. So I am an Indian, right? So now I get labeled I'm a pretend Indian because I say I'm an Indian. So I don't say I'm an Indian, I'm a Métis, right? This is how they do this corruption. And so that kind of, because we've been talking for a long time, Rick, this is the problem. And I don't have the solutions other than, in my case, it's really affected me heavily because my wife is First Nation, and it's brought back all the stuff about residential schools and everything, right? This is post-traumatic stress syndrome for myself and her, right? My family gave their lives in the Second World War and even in the First World War, right? To protect this country. And now it's been infiltrated by crazy people. That's basically it. Crazy people.
And by crazy people, I guess you're referring to some people within what is characterized as the freedom movement.
Yeah, but we don't have any psych hospitals anymore, do we?
Mostly they've been bulldozed. Yeah, they're out on the streets.
Yeah. So, that says a lot for our country. It used to be the peace country. It used to be really good. Not this is relevant, but they say that's ancient history. I have a glass that was produced at the time they changed the Indian Act in the 60s. This was the official crest of Canada on it from the 1960s. I verified it. It was a souvenir. I can't say that. A souvenir for tourists, right? Mm-hmm. It's a shot glass. 3 ounces, the big chief. 2 ounces, the clan mother. And then at the bottom, the papoose didn't get anything, right? That's in the 60s, in my lifetime, what the attitude towards Aboriginal people were. Until they changed the Indian Act in 61, 66 something, if 5 Aboriginals were seen in a town in Canada together, they were arrested for congregation and their children were stolen. They had to have a pass to leave the reserve. In 1960. That's well within my lifetime, right? This is the racism that is still there. But when I found that glass, that said it all to me. That put me on this path that I'm on, is that the racism is still there. And it's not going away. And this is supposed to be Canada, the wonderful multicultural, but I can't say I'm Aboriginal because if I do, I get blasted. He's a fake Indian, right? He's a pseudo-commercial entity. That's what the one court case said. I'm under the Meeks decision. A pseudo-commercial entity. How am I a pseudo-commercial entity? I'm a person, right? And if you say I'm a pseudo-commercial entity, that means I'm an artificial person. Oh, I forgot. Artificial people in the Constitution of Canada have rights because of the class of subjects, artificial people. Ships have rights. Harbor commissions and health units have human rights under the Constitution of Canada, but I don't have them because I'm a pseudo-commercial entity. I'm not a real entity. I'm a pseudo-commercial. That means I'm a non-entity. That's Canadian law.
Well, so the talks with the authorities, the RCMP, CSIS, FBI, these discussions are ongoing. It seems that the activities of some of these people have connected you to past activities and maybe even what's going on now, because you say that they're using your identity, even your signature at times without your authorization or approval. This creates a situation where you're being scrutinized by the authorities as well. Very delicate situation. And I guess we should probably wrap up with final thoughts from you and maybe a message to the general public and how people should be trying to protect themselves in the face of all of this.
Well, the old thing, Rick, is buyer beware, right? If you have no protection, you got to educate yourself, and you have to be very cognizant. There's so many frauds out there. On your phone constantly, you're getting scams, right? This is no different. This is internet. I verily believe internet scams, seduction for the people who don't know any better, who are looking for something because the government's not providing, and they'll get scammed. And this is big. And this one here is international. It's probably the biggest, I'll say the pretend Indian, because it really is. It's not just pretend Indian, it's just pretend something, right? This is the biggest case going. It's not an individual, it's a whole group of them. And they're utilizing these identities that they created for themselves to scam people. And it's obvious. You showed one right there. Self-promotion, that I'm this great and wonderful, the first or the founding member of a council. I've had councils for ASMIN all the way from the beginning, right? I've had my relatives who sat there, and we've had meetings, and we sat at dinner tables when I was a kid talking about how we're going to do this, talking about Louis Riel and all the issues out west. My family's been in this Aboriginal identity their whole life because they is. It's not that they aren't, they is, right? So it's buyer beware, and we're still peeling the onion on this thing because it's huge, and it may go further, because if you look at the Algonquin land claim, they're starting to kick out all kinds of people. I think there was 2,000 people put into the Algonquin land claim have been kicked out. When it started, my mother wouldn't go into it because it was too de minimis. But the lady Joan Holmes at that time, nice lady, she took my Nipissing descendancy and allowed all the Nipissing relatives to join the Algonquin claim, and I think they kicked them all out recently. So it's just crazy. It's so complex.
Yeah, and I guess when it comes to buyer beware, it isn't just the direct impact from engaging with one of these ASMIN entities. It's also sovereign citizens groups or others who might be selling products or courses online, especially legal courses, things of that nature. And Chief Miko, I'll throw it to you for your final thoughts.
Rick, I put in the chat for you. I mentioned earlier, if anyone that is listening to this, or it gets to the ears of someone that knows someone, again, as Grand Chief is worded, buyer beware. And if you have come across the ASMIN and you've bought this membership, please come forth. Let us, take note, write down exactly your experience, make sure that you're covered through this. I do reiterate, don't be trying to stand on that and make it a claim for you, especially in a court hearing. I know Grand Chief mentioned the AIN, the Alliance of Indigenous Nations. There's been looks into that whole situation with any orders that have been issued. They're null and void. They have no standing. If you have one of those orders and you need to have them readdressed, please reach out. And again, Rick, I did put the contact in there for them to reach out to the tribunal that is auditing all of this and ensuring that we get it kind of, one, a head count of damage, and two, ensure that no one, and we're making that public note for everyone to be ensured that they are aware that there's an investigation, to please not put themselves out there using an order or an ASMIN membership through this, especially until this investigation has cleared, which, case numbers are filed, multiple inter-border investigations as well. So if you're on Turtle Island and you have been a part of this organization over the last 4 years, feel free to reach out. We'll be in touch, making sure that we try to cover everyone and minimize any kind of damage.
And your email is, if that's correct on the screen, admin@internationalindigenostribunal.com.
Yes, that is the tribunal that will be auditing any of the AIN orders and can take in any type of claim of ASMIN membership as well. So everything can be accounted for financially, as well as any fraudulent orders that could be out there subsequently or to our belief would be fraudulent. Okay.
And since you are also in communication with, say, the RCMP or other authorities like that, would it be appropriate for people to approach police or RCMP as well if they have concerns?
Yes, absolutely. It's not for us to say no to them. They need to make sure that they're covering themselves, and the fraud has to be accounted for. Anyone that's gone into court as well and had damage done to their cases through this, please do reach out. I've had at least 6 or 7 call me alone. We don't want you out there floundering trying to figure out how to get through it. So please reach out. We're here to at least try to sift through all of this and get some right out of the wrong. Okay.
And again, I'll just restate that any of the information provided here is not necessarily an allegation of criminal wrongdoing, and any allegations that may be connected to any potential illegal activity have not yet been proven in court. So I'll just throw that out there for legal purposes. And Chief Wabiskaw, I will defer to you for a final comment to wrap things up with the program.
Yeah, it's difficult, Rick, and appreciate that. You can call me anytime if you want. As I've said before, I'm still recovering from the brain surgery. A lot of issues there. And this has been extremely difficult when I realized that my trust was highly violated. And one of the side effects of the brain surgery, I can't keep my emotions in check. But I feel for everybody who's been affected by this. And it's going to be a journey, and we'll get to the bottom of it. And there's a lot of other stuff that's happening that we can't talk about. But I verily believe that everything that I was relating here is truthful and accurate. But like you say, it has to be gone to the courts. And I haven't mentioned anyone's name, which is appropriate. But anyone who's been affected will know those names. And I appreciate the time today. I know I talk a lot, but that's just me, right? But people have to educate themselves. And they can't just take internet information. You have to really research. Like I know right behind me there, I'm talking a lot again. I got bins and bins of books that I've been collecting for years. And just for a point, you can't take the new books. You got to go back to the old books, because the old times, like 100 years ago, they didn't lie. But the new books, it's all misinterpretation, fake news, whatever. And so you have to be very careful of what information you bring in and make your own assumptions on. You have to well research it. And hopefully, with the world the way it is, there will be peace. And but it's hard to say where anything's going. The two critical lawsuits in Canada were the Powley and the Daniels. Both of the beginnings of those lawsuits passed before it finalized. I keep on making a joke with my friends that hopefully this will be resolved before I pass. It would be a sad state of affairs if this continues for the next generation, right? Anyhow, thanks, guys. I'm really, Chief, I appreciate you coming on. And anytime later, if you want to talk, we can talk, both of you. And that's all I can say. Just everybody, the Creator is watching. And whatever religion you are, as long as you believe in good thoughts and go in a good way, the Creator, whoever the Creator is to you, will bless you. Okay, thanks.
Hello. Chupisala chiki. Yokoki.
Uh-huh.
Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching.
The world is watching. On TV, the entire world is watching. On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
And with that, we are going to wrap up for the evening. Thank you, everyone, Maverick family, for being here this evening. Thank you to Chief Miko and to Chief Wabiskaw for sharing the information, their perspective. And I hope what we did tonight has a positive impact all the way around. I will return tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the Maverick News Channel, where we have the antivirus programs for your mind. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.